Right now, if you are sick, or if someone you love is lying in bed fighting something that won't let go, there is a presence in that room that no machine can detect, that no doctor can see, and that no amount of suffering has driven away. Your guardian angel does not retreat when illness comes. It draws closer, and what it does in those dark hours, the hours when you are too weak to pray, too exhausted to hope, too heavy even to form a thought, would change the way you understand every illness you have ever endured. Padre Pio saw this, not as a symbol or a comforting idea passed down through prayer books, as a fact, as solid and real to him as the flagstones beneath his feet. In the monastery at San Giovanni Rotondo, he saw guardian angels the way a man sees familiar faces in a crowd, clearly, specifically, without the effort that others have to make just to believe in them at all. And what he described, over decades of spiritual sight, is something the Church has always held to be true, but that Padre Pio saw as literally and visibly unfolding in every room where a human body was in pain. The question that rises in every serious illness, the one no one says out loud because it feels too close to the edge of faith, is whether heaven is watching, whether God, who allowed this to happen, is near enough to care. Padre Pio spent his life sitting with people who carried that question like a stone in their chest. And what he told them, what his eyes had shown him, was not that God was watching from a distance. It was that God was so close and working so actively that most sick people had no idea what was being done on their behalf in the invisible world beside their bed. Among all the gifts that marked this man's life, the stigmata that bled every day for 50 years, the knowledge of hidden sins that surfaced in the confessional, the reported visits to places he had never physically traveled, perhaps none was more constant than his familiarity with angels. The friars who shared the daily rhythms of the friary with him would later recall that he spoke of guardian angels the way most men speak of close companions, not with the careful theological distance of a professor, with the ease of someone who had spent years in their company. He sent his own angel on missions to pray alongside the angels of people suffering far away. He received what seemed like communications through them. He was known to correct men who walked past him without any acknowledgement of the being standing at their side, as if they had ignored someone they simply did not know was there. His sight was not a private gift meant only for him. It was given so that what he saw could be handed on, so that those of us who cannot see would still know what is truly happening in the invisible world that runs alongside our own. Imagine the scene as those close to him described when he spoke of what surrounds a sick person. Not an empty room with a suffering body, not a soul left alone in the dark, waiting for someone to arrive. Something much closer to a vigil. The kind soldiers keep on the edge of something critical, or the kind a mother keeps through the night when her child's fever refuses to break. The angel was there, not standing at a respectful distance, not hovering above the bed in the manner of religious paintings. It was close, beside the face, attending to something finer than the sound of breathing. What it was attending to was the movement of the soul inside the suffering body, because sickness does something to a person that almost nothing else can replicate. It strips the surface away. The noise of ordinary life goes quiet. The distractions that fill the day stop working. The constant movement and planning and avoiding falls still. And what is left in that enforced silence is the raw self, the part of a person that lives beneath the habits and routines and performances. That stripped-down self is more reachable than it has been in months, sometimes in years. The angel knew this. It was there precisely for that moment of exposure, because the soul that sickness has silenced is a soul that can finally hear something it had not been able to hear before. This is not a comfortable teaching, and it was never meant to be. Padre Pio was not a comfortable man, but he was a truthful one, and the truth he returned to again and again. The truth that his own suffering confirmed over years of illness that wore his body down was that God does not allow pain to open a door and then abandon the person on the other side of it. He sends the angel to stand in that doorway, not to force entry, never to force, but to offer, with extraordinary patience and precision, exactly what the soul in its stripped-down state most needs to receive. The angel, in the spiritual world that Padre Pio moved through as naturally as other men move through rooms, was never passive. It was not simply keeping watch the way a sentry stands at a gate, alert but motionless, waiting for a threat. It was active, working, moving between the sick person and something above, in a direction Padre Pio could perceive, but only incompletely put into words. What it carried upward were the sufferings themselves. Not as waste, not as the rubble of a body breaking down. Every hour of pain, every moment of helplessness, every night of fear. The angel was lifting them, presenting them somewhere, turning them into something that could enter the great exchange of suffering, that connects every person in pain to what happened on the cross, where suffering was transformed into the most powerful force in creation. And what the angel carried back down was harder to name. Not comfort exactly, because comfort suggests ease, and ease was not always what the sick person needed, or what God was offering. Not strength in any athletic sense, something quieter and deeper than both. The grace to survive the next hour, the permission to endure what had not yet ended, a kind of interior stillness that settled beneath the pain without removing it, the way the floor of a deep river stays undisturbed even while the surface churns. The angel prayed. This is something people who heard Padre Pio speak of it found difficult to fully receive, but it belongs firmly to the tradition he lived inside. The guardian angel intercedes without ceasing for the soul it guards. And in illness, that intercession does not wait for the sick person to join it. It does not pause when the sick person cannot form a single coherent prayer. It continues, not alongside the sick person, but woven into them. Think of a voice so low in a choir that it is felt more than heard. And when every higher voice falls silent, exhausted or broken, that low voice holds the melody underneath. The angel was that voice. It kept the thread of prayer going when the person inside had nothing left to give. This is the reason Padre Pio taught that no one is ever spiritually abandoned in illness. Not those who have stopped believing. Not those who are furious at God. Not those who have decided, in the bleak logic of a body in pain, that heaven is empty and prayer is a conversation with no one. Their angel keeps going. It holds the thread connecting them to grace, even when they have let go of it entirely. And on the other end of that thread, something is receiving what the angel sends, and responding to it, even when the sick person feels absolutely nothing. In those years at the friary, letters arrived constantly from families asking for prayers over sick members. Accounts gathered by those who witnessed these moments suggest that when Padre Pio held such a letter, something specific happened. He would grow very still, not the ordinary stillness of a man reading. A particular, focused stillness, like a man tuning into a signal through interference, turning the dial until a voice breaks through the noise. He was looking at the angel, and what he seemed to receive in return, the knowledge of the sick person's interior state, their fears, their resistance, what they most needed, went well beyond anything the letter contained. The letter gave him a name. The angel gave him the rest. This is a window into what guardian angels actually are. In the Catholic tradition, Padre Pio inhabited completely. They are not symbols of God's general care. They are not representations of a vague divine kindness. They are specific, personal, assigned, given to one soul and no other, for the entire length of that soul's life on earth. They know that person, the particular history with God, the particular doubts and hungers, the exact shape of the faith, and the precise weight of the doubt. They know which crack in the wall is wide enough for light to enter. And in illness, when the wall has been weakened by pain and fear and the sudden, undeniable consciousness of mortality, The angel presses toward every crack with everything it has. But Padre Pio also witnessed something that must be said plainly, because leaving it unsaid would be a kindness that ultimately fails the person who needs the truth. Not everyone allowed the angel to do what it was trying to do. Some people, in the grip of serious illness, did not simply struggle, they chose. They chose bitterness as a conclusion. They chose despair as their final answer to the question their suffering had raised. And they sealed that choice with a completeness that the angel, which never overrides the human will, could not undo from the outside. In those moments, what he described seeing was not an angel walking away. It did not leave, but there was something in the invisible scene that looked like a presence standing at a door locked from the inside. The graces, the openings, the gifts that illness had created space for. They waited on the other side of the door, in the angel's hands, unclaimed. Not because God had withdrawn them, because the person had closed their fist around the lock and refused. This was the thing that made Padre Pio weep in a particular way. Not with condemnation, because he understood suffering too well to judge the ways it breaks people, but with the grief of someone who could see both sides of a wall at once. What the angel was holding, the closed hand that would not receive it, and the knowledge that the distance between them was exactly one human decision wide, and that the decision could still, while breath remained, be unmade. This is perhaps the sharpest practical truth in everything Padre Pio understood about illness. Suffering is not neutral. It is one of the most powerful moments in a human life, for the kind of change that remakes everything, for the turning of the heart toward God, that can happen in a dark bedroom at 3 a.m, that years of comfortable, untested faith never managed to produce. The angel draws close when the body weakens precisely because that is when the door is most open. Not because it celebrates pain, because pain opens something that comfort never does. The guardian angel, in the spiritual world Padre Pio described, also attended to the body itself in a way that had nothing to do with medicine and everything to do with presence. There is a level of care for a suffering person that no drug can replicate, and no nurse, however skilled and devoted, can fully provide. It is the refusal to look away, the willingness to sit in the room with pain without flinching, without offering false comfort, without rushing the clock. The angel did this. In the hours when a sick person lay alone, whether by circumstance or by the strange loneliness that sometimes grows thickest in a crowded room, the angel's closeness worked below the level of conscious awareness. Something in the sick person registered it, not always as warmth or identifiable peace, sometimes only as the sense that the darkness was inhabited by something that was not hostile, not indifferent, and not going anywhere. Padre Pio knew this gift from the inside. His body was, from early adulthood onward, a site of continuous and serious suffering. The stigmata were not figurative wounds. They bled. They hurt. They were a source of constant physical distress that he carried without interruption for 5 decades. Various illnesses had laid him flat for weeks at a time throughout his life. He had known the long, dark night of the sickbed since he was young, and when he spoke of what a guardian angel does beside a suffering person, he was speaking from a place where he had received exactly this: the company of a presence that sat with him through every hour he could not shorten, and counted those hours alongside him, so he would not have to count them alone. The Catholic tradition that formed everything Padre Pio believed holds that the guardian angel is one of God's most intimate gifts to a human being, not assigned because God is too occupied to attend to each soul individually. Assigned because closeness is itself the gift, specific, undivided, personal closeness. The angel belongs to one person completely. It carries no other mission. It has never been given to anyone else. From the first moment of your existence, it was sent as the most concentrated form of care God could extend. A being that has known no other soul, that holds no divided attention, that exists in relation to you with a completeness unlike anything else in the created order. In illness, that singular devotion becomes most visible, The stripped-down self lying in the sickbed is the self the angel knows best. Not the performing self, not the busy self, not the self that fills the hours with motion to avoid being still. The quiet, helpless, honest self, the one that appears when the body fails. The angel has been waiting, in a sense that involves no impatience and no judgment, for that self to emerge, because that is the self it most needs to reach. The self beneath the noise is the self that can actually receive what it has been carrying for years. If you are sick right now, or if you are walking alongside someone in illness and feeling the helplessness of watching someone you love suffer, here is what the spiritual sight of Padre Pio says directly to you. The room is not empty. The night is not empty. Whatever you can feel or cannot feel, whatever you can pray or cannot bring yourself to form into words, the angel is there. It has not been waiting for the fever to break before showing up. It was there at the first symptom, at the first fear, at the first moment the ordinary rhythm of life was broken and the silence came rushing in. Speak to your angel, not with elaborate language, not with prayers you can barely mean. Speak the way you would speak to someone sitting in the chair beside your bed at 2 in the morning when everything else is dark. Tell it what you are afraid of. Ask it to carry what your body cannot carry. Ask it to keep praying when your own prayer has gone dry. The Church has always taught that guardian angels respond to being addressed, not because they need your attention, but because you need to know they are real. Speaking to them makes the invisible world a little more solid under your feet when the ground feels like it has gone soft. Offer your suffering rather than only enduring it. This was perhaps the deepest thing in everything Padre Pio lived. Suffering that is merely survived has not yet been fully used. But suffering that is offered, held up, even wordlessly, even with the smallest motion of a will that is too tired to do much else, becomes something the angel can carry somewhere you cannot go yourself. It becomes a prayer your body makes on your behalf. You do not have to master the theology of redemptive suffering to do this. You only have to be willing, once, in the long silence of a hard night, to say, "I do not understand this, but I am not wasting it." Padre Pio knew the long nights. He knew the kind of hour when the body is failing, and the mind cannot find solid ground, and faith feels less like a foundation, and more like a word someone else once said in a different life, and he knew. Because he had seen it, plainly and repeatedly, with the eyes that God had opened in him over years of prayer and suffering, that in every one of those nights, in every one of those rooms, in every bed where a suffering person lies, wondering if anyone in heaven even knows they are there, there is an angel counting the hours, not above the bed, not watching from a holy distance, right there, beside the face, listening for what is smaller than breath, holding gifts you cannot see, through a door you can still choose to open.